We've got this concept of balance all wrong. We're constantly taught over time to try and balance all different areas of our lives. At any one time, we might be trying to balance and potentially progress work, personal relationships, fitness, spirituality. There's only so many hours in the day. There's only so much that we can do. So if we're trying to input the same amount of ourselves into each of these areas, there's only going to be one outcome: average performance across all of them. So how do we reframe this? How do we think differently about what we've been taught about balance? The concept that I like to talk about, the concept that I certainly have taken internally myself, is around this thought process of having micro imbalance versus macro balance. And what that means is at any one time, we should be imbalanced, but over the long term, we should find balance. Hands up who's run a 10-kilometer race before. When you first started thinking about that, you're probably thinking, not sure if I can do that. Got that little niggle in the back of your mind that's saying, oh, I don't know. Whether that be a 10K, a half marathon, a marathon, whatever it might be, you wouldn't have been able to finish that race. So at that time, you were imbalanced because you focused in a specific area. You put all of your energy into that particular goal. So I want us to think about this concept of balance and really understand that if we goal set effectively across a long period of time, we can grow in each of these areas, but we just can't do it at the same time. But society tells us to always remain balanced, seek out a balanced life. But a balanced life is not what's going to achieve greatness in any of these areas. If I ask you to think about two people you look up to in the world, let's say one of them's an entrepreneur and one of them's an athlete. You got them in your mind? Those two people? I almost guarantee you that those two people have very little balance in their lives. We look up to those people because they've focused in a certain area, they've doubled down on it, and they've achieved greatness in that area. That's why we know their names. That's why we look up to them. But yet society is still telling us, remain balanced. It's only when we go all in that we achieve what we hope to achieve out of life. And over time, we can do so much more than we currently think that we can. My personal journey started 11 years ago. I was diagnosed with cancer. Fortunately, it was operable. I had an operation, a lot of monitoring, but I didn't have to go down the route of any more than that. But when someone sits in front of you and utters the words survival rate, it's like a gut punch. Instantly, you're thinking, shit, what haven't I done? What am I doing and why am I doing it? What's the actual motivation for what I've chosen to do over these past few years? Is it me? Is it because of somebody else? Why am I doing what I do? The fear of regret becomes very real. And that's one of the most powerful things that can happen to a human being. In Australia, there's a lady by the name of Bronnie Ware. She's a palliative nurse. And she wrote an article, which later became a book. She wrote an article called The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. The first one is the most powerful. And I've written it down, so I don't want to get this wrong. I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not what others expected of me. Let's let that sink in for a second. Now, how many of us are making decisions based on what we believe others are expecting of us. Many, many. In all areas of our lives. For me, I went through that journey and it drove me to a different mindset, a different way of thinking. It had a profound impact on the rest of my life. Shortly afterwards, I set up Create Media Group, which is an agency that I've been building over the last 9 to 10 years. All of a sudden, all of the fears that I perceived, I realized weren't fears at all. What is there to be fearful of once you've had a brush with your own mortality? Everything that you think is actually a problem is not a problem. Now, we've all been touched in one way or another by somebody going through something similar. I'm sure there's family members, there's all sorts. And when you come face to face with that mortality and that concept of why are we doing what we do, what's our motivation, and the perspective around all of that, it's a very, very powerful process. It's a very, very powerful driver of action. And what happens next becomes very, very interesting. For me, business was one way of living that out. Another was through fitness and sport. I understood that we didn't need to have so much balance. For me, on a personal journey, I wanted to go all in on certain things. Now, as we well know, there's plenty of entrepreneurs here in the room. Those that have spent many years and a lot of time, a lot of dedication building what's valuable to them. But as I say that, I'm sure the same people will also understand that you can't remain at 120% just focused on business before other things might start to go wrong. So when I say we need to focus rather than balance, it's to have stasis in those other areas. Don't let them drop. Don't let family relationships drop. But you can't grow everything at the same time. So if you're full tilt in business for a period of time, the goal being to build that to a point where you can say, right, well, maybe I can get an extra 5 hours a week back, 10 hours a week back. Now, what am I going to do with that? Am I going to choose to run a marathon? Am I going to reinvest it in relationships that I've let slide a little bit? It's understanding where those focus points are so you can then start to grow those other areas of life. For me, I was playing rugby at the time. I doubled down on that and I decided that without the skill required, I wanted to be the best possible rugby player. So I went all in on that. I trained 6 days a week, played for a few of the clubs here. I managed to squeeze into the international side for a while. And then I broke well, it was my knee rather than my leg. Snapped everything, reconstructive surgery, game over. Now all of a sudden I had a lot of time on my hands because those 6 sessions a week of multiple hours, I could then plug into something else. So I was like, right, now it's to focus on something else. For me, that became running. Because once, if anyone's ever gone through something similar, once you can start to actually move again, you can move in one direction. You can't move so well side to side, otherwise you fall over. So I started running, and that just I got further and further down that track. And running has taught me so many things that I've been able to bring into life, into business. The concept around mindset, around understanding difficult situations, and most importantly, how to actually react in some of those situations. I've got 2 stories. This running's been going on for a while now, but I've got 2 stories that are at different ends of the spectrum that have taught me very different things. I first decided to do an ultra marathon that was about 87 kilometers, and it was in Brecon Beacons in Wales. Hands up who's been to Brecon Beacons in Wales? Okay. Hands up who's even been to Wales? I'm Welsh, so I'm going to get offended if there's not a few more hands up in the air. It's a lovely place. The Brecon Beacons are quite a unique place. It's where the SAS do their training. It's quite a brutal terrain. So we had an 87-kilometer run to do across these mountains. It's like, right, what I didn't do was focus properly. I didn't listen to my own messaging, my own story, my own plan. I was spending way too much time going out with friends, still plugging away with the business, but thought I could run this race. It was a complete disaster from start to finish. I fell apart on the race, started complaining a lot, feet were sore. It didn't go well. Finished way at the back. Was very disappointing to the point where it really hurt. It hurt who I was trying to become. It hurt my pride. It hurt many things. So I got back from this race, and I thought to myself, no, you've learned a few lessons along the way. You've been through a few things. This isn't the worst thing, but let's try and get it out of the system. But every time anyone mentioned it, I had this little cold shudder inside. I was just like, oh. I was embarrassed inside about how poorly that I'd performed in that race. So I sat down and I realized that, right, well, what went right, what went wrong? Not much went right, and it went wrong because there was no focus. There was no dedication. There was no real detailed plan. And it's the same with work. It's the same with any challenge that you take on in any area of your life. You need to break it down. You need to have a plan. And you cannot be balanced at that point in time if you're aiming to achieve something that's exceptional. So I thought I had this monkey on my back, and I had to get rid of it. The only way that I could get rid of it was to think, I've got to go bigger, and I have to succeed. So I have to risk it all. It frustrated me all the time that I had this thought process. So fast forward a few years, actually no, pardon me, fast forward around about 12 months, and I'm sat on an aeroplane. And this aeroplane is a charter flight from Gatwick across to a town called Wazawate. I'm probably completely misspelling that. Sahara Desert in Morocco. This particular race is called the Marathon Des Sables. For those that don't know what the Marathon Des Sables is, it's a 250-kilometer self-supported race across the Sahara Desert. So, yeah, a little bit different. It gets more interesting. You have to carry everything that you need on your back as well. So they give you water, that's about it. But this, it was a different challenge, and it was a much bigger challenge. I'd spent months and months and months with one singular goal in mind. And goal setting is a decision-making framework. You set a big goal, a goal that's so big that you cannot attain it now. It's a very clear decision-making framework. Does what you're asking me, or asking of me, get me closer or further away from this goal? It's a simple two-step process. You're either going closer to the goal or you're going further away. So it became very easy in the build-up to that race because I was scared and also wanted to actually complete this. It gave me that framework to say, okay, you're asking me to do A, B, C, or D. Is it going to get me closer or further away? So it became very clear the power of goal setting once I'd set something like that. Sat on this plane, I looked around me. Everybody around me had Iron Man tattoos all over them. They were a completely different breed to who I was. I was sat there looking around, thinking to myself, what the hell have I got myself into? But now I'm on the plane and I'm flying to Morocco, so there's no option. It's happening now. I think to myself, right. I take out a pen and a piece of paper, and I say to myself, what do I want to come out of this goal that I've set for myself? What do I want this outcome to be? I write down on the piece of paper, not performance-related goals, but behavioral goals. I knew that I was going into a difficult situation. Many of you, when you're facing the goals that you set for yourself, you know that somewhere along the way, you're going to be facing a particularly difficult situation. With that knowledge comes power. You know it's going to happen, so therefore, you can choose how you're going to respond before you get there. You can lay out your plan on that piece of paper or in your mind to say, right, when this happens, this is who I'm going to be. This is what I'm going to do. And once you have that, once you get to that situation, you just follow the rules. If you leave it until the point that you're in that difficult situation, if you leave it to that point, you're going to find yourself making the wrong decision because it's human nature to take the easy route. It's human nature to step back when something's coming at you. But if you've decided how you're going to perform, it's a lot easier So I wrote down on that piece of paper a few things. Firstly, don't die. That was the first one. I didn't want to die. Secondly, I said to myself, not only are you going to complete this, but you're going to help others complete it too. Which at the time I thought was quite an arrogant thing to write down, considering my poor performance in the previous race, where I struggled to get myself over the line. But I said to myself, right, this is going to happen, and this is how you're going to behave. The third thing was don't complain once. Not once. I thought to myself, how are you going to go through a race that the Discovery Channel calls the toughest foot race on earth and not complain about a single thing? The power of knowing that I was going into that situation and the power of making the decision before I got there. This isn't a process. Changing behavior is not a process. It's a singular decision that you can make at any point. As of today, I will do X. As of today, I will behave like X. It's a singular decision. And that power became so apparent to me when I went through that process. I'm happy to say that yes, I did survive the run. I did finish it. And I was more proud of looking back at that very scrumpled, dirty piece of paper that I carried with me for that 250K than I was of the finisher's medal. Because I could now think of a race. I could now think of the biggest goal that I'd ever set for myself. And not only actually getting through it, but more importantly, the behavior that came with it. And that then set me on a path of understanding, of doubling down on that over time. That has become pretty much the way that I've chosen to live life today. And there are so many powerful lessons in that I think that people can take away from it. Don't get sidetracked by the fact that it's a 250K race across the Sahara. That's irrelevant. It can be a 10K race. It can be a 5K race. It can be whatever your big goal is. This is just an example of my big goal and the power that going through that process really gives. Taking us back to balance and comfort and other spaces in the vicinity. As well as being told to have a balanced life, we're also constantly, as human beings, trying to seek out comfort. But yet, if we go back to those two people that you thought of earlier in this talk, those two people will have gone through so much pain, so much anguish, so many difficult situations that has helped them grow as individuals, that has helped them grow as athletes, as business people, entrepreneurs, whoever that might be. They've gone through that because they've sought out those difficult situations because they know that that is where the growth is. It's easy to sit back and say that we're busy. It's the adult's version of the dog ate my homework. It's not acceptable. We all have the same number of hours in the day. President of a country has the same hours in a day, but think how much they accomplish. But yet we're too busy to get up and go for a jog for an hour in the morning. We can fit so much more into our schedules if we prioritize it. So once we understand the power of prioritizing, once we understand the power of seeking out discomfort and what that can do for us, once we understand that we shouldn't be balanced and that we must have micro imbalance with macro balance, when we put these three elements together, it is one of the most powerful blueprints to achieving literally whatever you want in life. You can apply this to business. You can apply this to fitness. You can apply this to relationships. All of these areas. When we go through difficult situations, it won't always go according to plan. Sometimes it goes completely the opposite direction. So you think you've got this plan, you think you're going from step to step to step to success. It's not linear. None of it's linear. One of the greatest lessons that I've learned from running is that you can be feeling absolutely horrendous, but yet 15 minutes, you can be on top of the world. Very similar to life. Nothing's changed. You just went through a hole and you came out the other side because something around you changed. But you as an individual, what was the lesson that you learned from that is to just keep moving forward, keep plugging away, and you will come out the other side of whatever it is that you're facing. There was a book that I read the other day. It's called The Ultra Mindset. There was a guy called Travis Macy that's done some incredible things in the world of ultra running. And one of the things that he said that his father had taught him, which I thought was very, very powerful, is that you might not always be achieving your goal, but you always need to be building the mindset required to reach that goal. So if you're going through something and you realize that you're going towards failure for that day, just keep plugging away, because it's all good mental training. And the stronger we can make our minds, the more willing that we are to put ourselves in areas of discomfort, the more imbalanced we're willing to be for short periods of time, the more successful we'll be as people across all areas of life. Thank you very much.